Okay, we're good. We're good. Thank you so much. Not sure why that happened. Anyways, I'm going to give a couple housekeeping things here and turn it right over to you. So just want to thank everybody for coming to this session, Rethinking Community Outreach during COVID-19, Centering Identity and Representation using a virtual book club model. We do have the closed captioning, so if you want to turn that off, you can by clicking the arrow next to Live Transcript CC and selecting Hide Subtitle. We are recording the session, so all chats are going to be recorded, and that includes private chats. And we'll send recordings of sessions to registrants after the conference. And if you have any questions at the end, you can put those in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question. If you are sending a chat, just make sure you put it to everyone so we can all see it, and mute yourself if you're not speaking. So now I will turn it over.
Well, thank you all for coming to listen to some of our exciting programming that we were able to begin during a pandemic when I was certainly thinking as a librarian that programming would fall off. But also we're excited to share that we actually have some next steps in mind and moving forward. So I'll briefly introduce myself and then allow Lisa and Jill to introduce themselves. My name is Allison Bryan, and I am the librarian in the Curriculum Resources Center within the School of Education at Elon University.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here at a time of the year, especially in academia, where things are just really heavy and busy and crazy. So we hope this is a good use of your time today. I'm an associate professor here at Elon University in the School of Education. And prior to this, I was a classroom teacher, and I also spent 8 great years down at UNC Wilmington. So thanks for being here. And hi to Lisa Coates. I recognize you from Randall Library.
I'm Jill Harper. I am the media specialist at Williams High School, which is in Alamance County, and I'm also a very proud Elon alum.
So we'll just get started, and please do feel free to ask questions along the way or interrupt us. We hope that this will be a helpful time for you to think about ways that you can implement a similar program in your space or in doing your work. And we like to think of ourselves as pretty flexible and happy to stop along the way to make this meaningful for you. So hopefully, as I mentioned, by the end of this presentation, you'll have an idea about how maybe you could use this model and tweak it a little bit to work for your space. We were really excited to be able to use technology to reach a larger group than I think we typically would reach, actually, if we were doing this in a face-to-face setting. And a more diverse group, I think, too, when we're talking about the sort of people that we realized were interested in this sort of offering. And then one thing that's very important to us in education, particularly now, but this has had a long history, is making sure that we're selecting and giving practitioners tools to select titles that center own voices literature when librarians are thinking about programming or teachers are thinking about sharing text with their students. So we realized that there was a need for practitioners to find places that they can get high quality, authentic, representative literature written by people in those communities.
So I'm going to go through a little bit of the logistics that tells a little more of the story than just the title, which hopefully there were some parts of the title of our presentation that drew you in. So this will give you a little more of the nuts and bolts. So we, in our larger sort of multi-year vision for this group, logistic-wise, we wanted to do a 3-year project. So this would have been our first year of our project. So the title that we picked for the first in this series of virtual book club engagement is Look Both Ways by Jason Reynolds. So if you're not familiar with Jason Reynolds, he has authored, and Jillian's holding up the cover of the title right now that we used. He has authored many titles for upper elementary, middle, secondary students. And as you know from our title, we were focused on educators. And when we say educators, we mean anyone who is working with from pre-K through 12 education. So in any type of capacity, not exclusive to classroom teachers. We wanted to offer regular co-facilitated meetings. And because of the number of people who responded, we had 85 teachers, 85 educators. I'm still correcting myself on saying that, sign up for the virtual book club. And so we decided, Allison and I, who created this opportunity, that we needed to lower the numbers attending so that folks could have more opportunity to participate and engage with one another, and not only in like breakouts. So even with a small group that they would have, whole group that they would have a small enough number to engage. So we decided to offer each of the meetings. So we had 4 different meetings 2 times. So it ended up, we had them on Tuesday evenings and 4 o'clock session and a 7 o'clock session. And we went back and forth about the times for that, because understanding that as facilitators, we also needed to have boundaries around our availability and look at our schedules as well, so that we could be committed to it. We decided, well, 4 o'clock might capture those who are still on campus, but students have dismissed. And then 7 o'clock would capture those who have to leave right after. Maybe they have childcare, maybe they have other commitments. And then actually one thing that ended up happening here locally, which most of the teachers were in our local school system, was that the start end times shifted because of virtual learning and a return to like hybrid. And so some people were actually still teaching at 4 o'clock or had students they were responsible for. So 7 o'clock allowed folks to do that as well. We also, this third point is really important. And if you happen to work with K-12 educators in the club that you're thinking about, CEUs, that drew a lot of people in. Folks needed it. The school systems, by and large, had kind of dropped the ball a lot on this. Folks, they just needed CEUs, continuing education units or credits. And so we are an institution that's able to grant that. And so we leveraged that for participants, and they received 1 CEU, and we were able to differentiate that based on, so librarians received, classroom teachers that maybe needed 1 for literacy. And then the last part was we figured out all of our participants. We sat down with, we have an excellent, Allison does, in the CRC student who's a work study student, and figured out where everyone was at, and we delivered the books to their school sites. If they were not in, so they were fully remote, we took them to their homes. And so they had everything they needed to log in to do our virtual book club.
We should say too that we need to thank Ann Bullock, our Dean of the School of Education, because we did apply for some grants. We'll talk about this later, but we were not able to secure grant funding right at the beginning. But thankfully, the Dean of the School of Education believed in what we were doing and put forth the money to purchase a copy of the book for everybody who indicated interest. And actually, one other person who was the 80-some-year-old mother of one of the participants and would listen kind of in the background, but wanted her own copy of the book to read along. So we're grateful for that source of funding, although it is not renewable. We have to find some funding moving forward. As we all know right now, DEI initiatives are increasingly important right now. We need to consider our students' identities, their experiences, their authentic stories. Rudine Sims Bishop wrote in 1990 about the importance of literature acting as a window, a mirror, and a sliding glass door. I think we talk about that all the time in our disciplines. And so we recognize that in the middle of pandemic teaching and moving from online instruction to hybrid instruction and worrying about the logistics of just doing school systems weren't in a position to be able to offer deep professional development around this area because they were just trying to get through the day, so to speak. So we recognize this as an important need for our local educators, and we wanted to create that space for them to think about identity and representation as it impacts their personal lives, their professional lives, and all of their interactions with their students. We, of course, wanted to allow for community building. Anybody that's ever been in a school knows that teachers are social creatures in a way. They chat in the hallway and have conversations at the copy machine. And that was lacking for a lot of teachers in the pandemic when they were teaching either online from their classroom by themselves or even at home. In fact, in one of the group discussions, one of the participants said she was just so thankful for adult interaction that was not with her husband or her mother-in-law who lives with her. And so she was really craving an opportunity to build community with some teachers that were or educators in her own school, but also educators across school buildings. And then, of course, we have to recognize the increase in Own Voices literature that has been published recently. Obviously, there is still a lot of work to do, but sometimes, you know, teachers and educators and even librarians have a hard time thinking about new publications when they're just trying to get through with what they're doing day to day. So we wanted an opportunity to expose some of these educators to some new titles that were not already in the book closet. So, so those were the things that we were thinking about. And it turns out that we were pretty well spot on with some of the needs that we anticipated in the schools.
Okay, so I mentioned a little bit about the structure of the meetings earlier, but we had sort of a semi-structured format, knowing that folks would appreciate kind of having an idea of what to anticipate. I think this is important if you were to have a face-to-face or virtual book club. Also, remember, these participants may have connections with each other in the community. You know, they might currently be at Williams High School, but maybe before they were at Southern. So they, you know, have some connections potentially, but they also might have, you know, been in a group with folks that they didn't know. So we wanted to give a little bit of structure for it. So across the meetings, we basically did 3 things each time. We had an opportunity for content sharing. Some of the things that we did, knowing that these were all educators, is we modeled things like discussion strategies and used them. We gave resources related to that. We also taught, like directly taught in our first meeting, what are some different book club models? Because our goal was that these folks, no matter what their position is as an educator, that they might take on some type of a book club model in their area. So if they were a school librarian, they might do a book club for teachers at the school. If they were a 5th grade teacher, they might rethink the way they do literature circles and book clubs in their classrooms. And then also each of the weeks we talked about the Own Voices movement. And for example, one of the things that we did that I think ended up being one of the more powerful aspects and tangible, I can do this tomorrow, was we featured titles for elementary, middle, and secondary that were examples of Own Voices. And then we had a natural discussion that flowed where participants talked about how they had used those books with learners, or they had read it themselves, or this was a book that they've been waiting to read, and so forth. So some really like one of the goals, given that we were working with educators, was what are some things we can take back and do this week in our setting. An extra and also important part of that is we started the book club, everybody was virtual. Halfway through the book club, we became hybrid. By the end of the book club, some folks, when I say we, I mean the educators in their setting. Elon's been back face to face the whole school year. And towards the end, our educators had students that were fully face to face and fully online. And some of the online students were also not synchronous, they were asynchronous. So these educators were looking at some of the strategies, and we were thinking, well, which of these could you use right now because your students are virtual? Okay, what are some of the things that you want to know about, but you want to kind of put that aside because you think you might use it in the fall? So we did a lot of talking like that and allowed for that in our design. We also used, because we were on Zoom, right? We did use the chat box sometimes for responses. We also used breakout rooms. That's where they did most of the discussion of the sections we would read. And then we also had whole group. So we broke that up a little bit. We met for about an hour to hour 20, 15, 20 each time. So this gave them space, right, to mix it up, just like anybody would want to break things up after 10 or 15 minutes. And then we also collected data before the book club began to design the book club meetings during the book club. So at the end of each, we would collect informal data to plan for the next. And then at the end of our book club, we have data for understanding our next iteration. So data collection was really important for us to inform our decisions.
Here are some of the pre and post survey responses that we received from the participants. So you can see that part of the survey, part of the information we requested from our participants was to see their comfort using book clubs as a pedagogical tool, understanding identities different from their own and how it impacts their planning, and then locating and selecting titles that feature characters with identities that are different from their own. They were asked to self-assess their comfort on a Likert scale from 1 to 5, where 1 indicated not comfortable at all, and 5 they felt very comfortable. And you can see that each indicator was improved through the course of the book club and the discussion surrounding it. So we feel pretty pleased that we were able to make a little bit of headway in this with just 1 iteration, 1 book, and 4 conversations around these topics. And then to follow up, we did ask some open-ended questions. These are the same participant. These are 2 separate participants, but 1 participant before they participated. So the pre-survey, they were asked how they would define identity. And this participant began the book club by saying, I'm 30 and I don't know that answer to that question. And then afterwards, you can see they had a much more in-depth and thoughtful response, that they were able to say, it's the way I think about myself, the way I'm viewed by the world, characteristics that define me. And then again, with this other participant, we see growth in the response about how they define identity from just who I am. And it's a little bit more, the new response is more nuanced. All the groups you belong to. We did talk a little bit about intersectionality. We didn't go deeply into it, but and how you're seen by others and how you consider yourself to be. And then here an example of how the instruction or interactions with students changed. You can see that even before participating, this particular book club member did know that identity was important and tried to address it in their interactions and work with students. But you can see that they have found some more interest and importance around the interacting with students and bringing identity really to the forefront in their pedagogical decisions that they are making.
We just wanted to share a couple of tech tools that we found to be useful that extended what we were doing in Zoom. At this point, we're all like more familiar with Zoom than we probably want to be. But I will say it was a great tool for being able to make this happen. And we've talked about, just informally, the three of us, about how this is probably the format that we might use in the future just for accessibility for folks. Travel, you have to think about travel. If they were to come to campus, you have to think about parking. Availability, and also the fact that folks are getting out at different times. This would be with our focus being maybe like, classroom teachers. But if we did this with a larger, maybe more broad community group, Zoom might not be, necessary, but it's something that we really want to keep in our back pocket. So we mentioned the way that we collected data and have had folks respond. So we certainly used the chat box, and that was fun because everyone had it right there to see responses. But we also used Padlet. We also collected data with Google Forms. That was especially important for our pre and post surveys for our planning, and then also planning in the next realm. How many of you have used dot storming? Anyone familiar with dot storming? So Allison taught us about this tool, and I've used it with some success this semester in class as well. And so it's kind of like an online sticky board, and you can move things around. And then you're most likely familiar with Jamboard if you've used Google Classrooms to any extent, or Google Tools. But Jamboard is also a nice way to collaborate. Also, you can, so it's in real time, just like Padlet, just like dot storming. Oh, I see that Lisa wrote in the chat box, dot storming, hadn't heard of it. Okay, good. So you just do like a general, just like Padlet, an initial sign up. It does have a limit on the number, but I've pretty much have gotten around that by deleting the ones I don't need and, starting again, same thing with Padlet. So those are great collaboration tools, not just for classroom, but, any types of asynchronous meeting type of thinking and working. So it's really just brainstorming. So if you're thinking about doing something like this with community members, you can certainly collect responses in more ways than just in that Zoom chat box.
I have linked a lot more details for these different topics, but I was trying to think of what would be helpful if you're planning to do something. I'm a librarian, so I am always on the hunt for things that might benefit my teachers or my students. And so when I learned about this, I was very excited about it. And it has been a huge blessing in a year when I've been doing a lot of technology troubleshooting and not been able to do much library related programming or professional development. So I'm glad that Allison and Lisa did this. I learned about it. Our district has an information officer, and she sent out a district-wide email, and that's how I first learned about it. And I think you guys also sent reminder emails for each session, which was really helpful. And then those forms where you gathered some of the data were usually in the reminder email, and then also in the chat or the slides for each session. So I think from a participant perspective, you communicated well the objectives and kind of what you needed us to come prepared with and think about. So why did I participate? I'm a librarian in a pandemic doing a whole lot of tech troubleshooting, and I wanted to talk to people about books and stories and how you find things like that. And so it has really, really been one of the best parts of the year. And I'm really glad that we got to do it. I'm the district level high school rep for our high school librarians. There are 6 of us, and we've been meeting throughout the pandemic via Zoom, but most of what we've been doing is technology troubleshooting. In the past, our high school and middle school and elementary school groups have done PD with a book that we pick, and we're able to kind of focus on strategies or selecting materials for our students and teachers, but this year really has just been tech troubleshooting. So being able to do this part of our job has been really great. Out of the 6 of us, I think 2 of us participated for all of the sessions. 2 people had signed up. I don't think they were able to participate. So I might owe you 2 books. But we have talked about it with our high school group meetings, even if everybody wasn't able to participate in all of the sessions. Another reason I wanted to participate was that I wanted resources that I could share. So we got the free book. I read the book. I gave it to an EC teacher. I had a history teacher at my school do this, as well as an English teacher and a science teacher. So we could have some conversations in our building or via email, that kind of thing. And being able to talk to them about it was nice as well. The slide that you shared with the pre-data and the post data about people's comfort levels at selecting materials is incredibly helpful to me as a media specialist. I would really like to share that with the whole district because I think it's a place where we can go in and help our teachers, but be strategic about it because they are overwhelmed big time this year. Some other reasons that I participated, I think it's a really important conversation. It's something I'm really interested in. I wrote my master's paper in grad school about Native Americans in children's literature. And so I've been kind of following this topic for about a decade or so. And it's encouraging to see that there are more hashtags and there's more public conversation about how you tell stories and if kids see themselves in books and what kind of books you're able to find and where you can find those. I hope it keeps growing. But it's something that I think is really important for students, for teachers, also for our students' families. And one of the slides you guys were talking about how community has changed so much during the pandemic. That's really true with kids coming into school buildings or not being able to come into school buildings for their parents, either having their kid with them at home or so it's just been a very different year, and having that opportunity to participate to get a little bit of community has been really also encouraging. It's been a very encouraging, that might just be my word for the experience. It was encouraging. In my notes on this slide at the bottom, I have linked some presentations that I found useful that are related to this topic. So if you're doing some sort of PD related to this, or if you're doing research related to this and you share it with educators, having a resource that we can go back to and keep consulting is really helpful. I know it takes a lot of time to put together materials, but if it's something that is relevant or accessible to all grade levels and all content areas, it will get used. We'll go back to it again and again. I think that is pretty much all the reasons why I wanted to participate. What did I take away from the experience? I took resources that I could share with students and teachers. I've had conversations with colleagues that are librarians, but then also been able to talk to people in the breakout rooms. I was lucky. All of my breakout room conversations were good. We didn't sit in black box silence. So we had conversations. I know that's maybe not always the case for every breakout room, but we were able to have good conversations. As a media specialist, I think that we're always used to trying to connect to whatever PD we're in or the people that we're talking to. And I don't know if every discipline thinks like that when they go into PD. So some of the things that I took away from this were just maybe being aware that if I have a history teacher participating in something and an English teacher and a science teacher, they might have different goals for their participation. And if I am busy and don't think about asking about that at the beginning, I might not be able to help them as much as I could if I'm really intentional and aware of what do they want out of this. Are their objectives, do they align with what I'm trying to do? So that was a takeaway. I also really, really want to give this book to my bus drivers. I think that one of the nice things, at least for me, with community related to this book, is that it shows how so many people are involved in a student's educational experience. And I think some of those people in situations like this whole pandemic experience, some people are doing really important work that may not get recognized, and having them feel like they are a part and they're recognized matters. So I want to give them to my bus drivers, and I really want to do that. The community that we had with the book club, with the different sessions, was also something that I would like to kind of keep up with. I don't remember everyone in my breakout groups, but I know there were some other high school people, there were some middle school and some elementary schools, and not everyone was a classroom teacher. So that was kind of nice. Allison and Lisa, if you could maybe send out a list of the people and what our positions are, that might be a good kind of follow-up that we could kind of make sure we're connecting with people and still having conversations if we want to. So those were some of the takeaways. Another big takeaway, and I think it relates to community, I missed one of the meetings. I broke my foot in February, and the thought of trying to Zoom after a really long day was just overwhelming. So I missed the second meeting. But even though I missed that second meeting, I didn't feel like I couldn't participate, because y'all had created kind of that community of flexibility and being able to jump into a conversation, even if you weren't able to get to all of the meetings. The one I missed is the one when you use Jamboard, and that's the only tech tool I haven't used. So I'm going to have to go back and look at that a little bit. Would I participate again? Yes, I really want to. I had missed that you guys were going to do a series of 3. So I'm really excited that this was just the first one, and there's two more coming. So I'm excited about that. I don't know what the fall is going to look like. Lisa had talked about how our schedule changed lots of times, and that has been a challenge for pretty much everyone involved. And so the flexibility of the 2 sessions was hugely helpful. I couldn't do a 4 o'clock session, but I could go to a 7 o'clock session. Our elementary schools get out a lot earlier than our high schools. And so it's very helpful to have that option. Even if you plan to do one and you miss it, something comes up, you could do the next one. So I know that is a lot more work on your end, but it was a huge, huge help for me to be able to participate. Some other things that were helpful, you were flexible in delivering the book and picking the book up. That was really helpful. I know I've told Allison, I love the bookmark that you guys made. It included all of the session times, and it also included the chapters that we were supposed to read for each session. And then on the back, it talked about like, what's the overall goal, conversations around identity. So that was something that was really helpful. It's a small printed piece of paper, but it's not a link. I don't have to click on it. I can see it, I can carry it around with my book, and that was really helpful. And then Lisa talked a little bit about the CEU process, and that was another reason I wanted to participate. I could participate, I didn't have to plan it, I didn't have to have an agenda, I didn't have to make sure that the CEU information aligned with the district's requirements for CEUs. I just got to upload mine and say, I did this, please give me credit. And so that was another reason I wanted to participate, and that was something that helped make it feasible. I also know how Zoom works, and our district has Zoom accounts, so being familiar with that helped as well. And Zoom does let you be flexible. You can Zoom from many different locations, and you can multitask at least a little bit. So that was one thing. While I really miss a lot of what Allison was talking about with interactions that teachers and students have on campus, and kind of that informal, almost professional development that you have talking to colleagues about things that you're interested in or things that your students are interested in. Zoom does have some benefits, and flexibility is one of them. Zoom can also be a challenge. So some of the challenges, you can have Zoom overload. You can just be overwhelmed by information and technology right now. And so that can be a challenge, but it's not one that's insurmountable. I did have a broken foot, so getting to that meeting, I didn't make it. And I'm thankful that y'all didn't give me the cold shoulder and I could still participate. We also have multiple levels of people participating. I don't know that one of my teachers kept coming back because I think that maybe her breakout room was not people that taught kind of the same level as she did, or the same content area. And I don't think that that's anything, like there's only so much you can control when you're facilitating something like this, but a challenge is picking something that's relevant for everyone, and that they're interested in. I think Look Both Ways is a good one for middle school for sure. And I think ninth graders can use it a lot. And I've talked to my English teacher about maybe trying to use it in a short story unit, because you could use the chapters as short stories. So I have enjoyed this book. Lisa had talked a little bit about instructional strategies and modeling things and things that you could take away and use immediately. And I appreciate that. And I know that that is hard to do when you have K through 12 people participating, because the way we engage our students is very different. And then let's see. I think librarians, again, are very used to PD that might not be targeted to you. And I don't think other content areas are as used to trying to look for connections. So that's something that I think is challenging. The last thing that I wanted to look at, and I know I need to look at the chat too, is book clubs and academic community. The student book club that an English teacher and I have been doing this year has probably been the best part of my year, because the students have showed up every single Friday when they did not have to via Zoom. And we've had some really good conversations, and we've been able to build a pretty good community even during a year when most of them are still remote in our book club. I don't know, I think maybe one kid is on campus right now. So community matters. And I think stories help make people recognize situations that they might not have thought of, and then also be able to empathize, and then maybe ask questions of situations that really do matter, but that you might not be familiar with. With book clubs in the academic community, I think inviting specific groups can help you, and also having a focus or titles chosen. It was helpful to know like what your goal was, what your objective was when I was signing up to do this, because I'm interested in it. If I'm not interested in that, then maybe this isn't the PD for me. And I think with student teachers this year, community has probably been really, really hard. If you're a new teacher and you're in a building and you don't know anybody, it's been a hard year to get to know people. And I think book clubs can help people feel like they are a part of something. And then support staff. I really want to give this to my bus drivers, because I think sometimes those staff members don't feel as included academically. The very last thing that I wanted to mention that kind of ties some of this together is that I think public schools have a lot of different partnerships going on, and Elon has been a really good community member with making, like, putting your money where your mouth is in Alamance Burlington schools. When Dr. Book was installed as the new president, she did a book drive, and she donated funds to all of our school libraries. So we each got an equitable amount of money, and we were able to buy resources for our students. And that is something that I will always think about whenever I see PD coming from Elon, because I know that from the top down it matters, and she put her money where her mouth is. And so that impacted my decision to do this. So those are some of the things from a participant perspective that I was hoping would be helpful for you guys.
So we've talked about a lot of these things, but we did learn some lessons. We've talked about Zoom tons and tons. And Lisa and I have talked about how the importance of, in education, we call it formative assessment, to be able to meet the needs of our students in the classroom. But also we were reminded of this again, working with and asking questions of your community and of the participants to make sure that you're able to meet their needs. You can see that we feel like address a community need, a networking need. But we did realize that maybe we extended ourselves a little further than we should have when we allowed over 80 people to have the choice to participate and purchase over 80 books, which no money spent on books is ever a waste. But we are thinking about how we can make sure that we're making it a meaningful experience, and maybe limiting the number of people that participate in a single new iteration of this. Funding was a little bit tricky for us, but we're excited to report that we just found out 2 days ago that we did win a grant to do this for one more year. So hopefully 3 more titles. And I do think that we might think about how we can better leverage our social media presence to share what we're doing and to connect educators to one another and to the people at the university. Elon has a pretty big Twitter presence in the School of Education. And so the connections that we're able to make between faculty members and practicing educators have been really strong to encourage these sorts of conversations. So do you all have any questions that we can answer?
And I would be interested in hearing why you chose to attend this session. So like what ideas are kind of brewing for you? What are you thinking about? Or maybe you just don't have a particular audience or participants in mind. Knowing that you're all from different backgrounds, I think that would be like, we're happy to spend the next 10 minutes even brainstorming with you. You heard us mention that one of the problems we ran into is funding. And so this recent funding that we won, and we didn't win the full amount that we requested. So that's important to note too, but is really thinking about who's going to give us money for this, right? So since this is an outreach, or as Allison mentioned, Dean Bullock, purchased our books for the first iteration. However, this is not necessarily an operation from the School of Education, right? So it's not directly tied to courses and things like that. And so that's something to think about, is like, how are you going to get this funded? And then for anyone who's in a space where you're doing teaching, research, service, some of those, all of those, then how would this fit best into sort of your trajectory, so that it's better woven? So those are some things to think about too, right? So like, this is not an initial part of my research trajectory, but it's now part of my research. However, I'm completely committed to both pre-service and in-service teacher development and networking and community building. And so it does connect to my teaching to a certain point, but my course, it's not embedded in one of my courses, right? But at the same time, I'm working with Fabulous Allison, and this is like right up her alley, right? So she's an advocate here. This is part of outreach and programming and all of those things. But also this is extending what she's doing as far as research. And then we have, limitations. So I say that mouthful to say that, like, recognizing where you are and what you're doing, and then trying to brainstorm for something that's a good fit, but also the reciprocity with your participants. So we did a lot of, probably something we didn't say in this presentation enough, is the amount of prep prior to the implementation, I think, was really important for the success of this first iteration. So we started meeting back in the fall to plan for this. And of course, part of that was we were looking for money, right? Like we needed somebody to buy these books. So anyways, I just say that to say, like, find folks that you can network with towards that end, to make that happen. And the planning is particularly important, I think. See, Lisa Coates says, I'm a huge fan of book clubs. So I was curious about how you did this and to get ideas about how to run discussions. Oh, Melissa Raymer. Yeah, absolutely. This would be right up her alley. She's so good at this stuff. And so, say like the example in the chat box. So you might work with your K-12 educators in New Hanover County, but you also might work with community members, or you might do something that's faculty development around any topic, right? You have a huge university. So you also might partner with CTE there to do something, very focused work. But yeah, so like Lisa's saying, for example, here, she has certain strengths and she has certain interests, but she's already thinking of a partner that she might work with. And so I think that's important planning wise. This is like, I would not have implemented this entire thing myself. So just thinking about facilitating Zoom for 85 people, I'm not interested in doing that by myself. But as Jillian can tell you, Allison and I had sort of like a we have a good back and forth, and set up. And so when you're doing something virtual like this, like just to share that, like just to share the mental load of Zooming with that many people, right? That you can break up and give each other, time and play to your strengths. So Lisa, it sounds like you have some ideas brewing, and we'd be happy to touch base with you if you need any help in your planning and so forth. Going to your point about discussions, I would say Allison mentioned earlier, if you ask the right questions when what was that you said, Allison, on that lessons learned slide? You ask the right questions. Can
I
you go
don't know,
back one
they'll
slide?
tell you or something.
Yeah, the participants will tell you what they need. And so, preparing
Yeah.
and doing Google Forms, some of that's going to be based on the title that you pick and so forth. Like we did not have any issue with participation, like in the synchronous, participation part.
And Lisa and I had a lot of discussions ahead of this before we landed on this idea. We knew we sort of wanted to do something around own voices literature. We knew we wanted to get into the practitioner world, sort of, but we thought about, adopting a classroom and working with students, or bringing, offering like a pandemic book club as an enrichment activity for students who are participating in online learning. And we just had a lot of conversations until something really felt right. We talk a lot about data, but also I also sort of go with my gut sometimes, and it just felt right to do this in this way. And the extension of grace, I cannot emphasize that enough. There was one book club session where I can't remember exactly what it was, but I had
Oh,
to
I know what you're
go
talking
to
about.
the
You had
late one.
You had a football practice and a soccer game, and I
Yeah.
had a teething 2-year-old on my shoulder, and like we were just tag teaming it. And so we felt like we were able to explicitly say, like, we're tag teaming this more than usual. So you might see Lisa and then she disappears, or Allison or whatever, because this is life. And it was interesting because the participants affirmed for us, like, oh, this makes us feel so much better. We were so casual, like folks were eating and drinking and doing things, and they may have to pop out to put a kid to bed and then come back. And I mean, isn't that what we want to communicate to our learners, right? That they have lives. And we're talking very specifically about working with educators, but I would just encourage that whoever you work with, like if you decide to work with parents in the community, or you decide to, have a book club for whatever and I don't know what everybody's background is as far as your potential participants would be, but like extending them grace, and then extending yourself grace. Like, sometimes things are going to come up, but that's also why you need to have like a group of 2 or 3 that are facilitating, because sometimes, things are going to happen. You're not going to be able to make the date. We did try to be really clear, like Jillian wrote in the chat box. Planning wise, we already knew how we were going to break up our book. So that bookmark said, like, read this section, this date, here's the time. And then Allison was so good about, we had a listserv, right, for the emails. So she would send out an email, like if it was on Tuesday, it would be Monday evening or Tuesday morning, and it would have the Zoom link again. Because you know what? Sometimes people delete the email that had the Zoom link. So that's okay. So we gave them everything they needed that they could log on. And so I think that was part of like extending grace as well too. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions or things that you're thinking about that you might want to troubleshoot or brainstorm with us? We have about 2 minutes left.
Yes, about 2 more minutes left. Yep.
Also, I'd just direct you to this last slide. I've put it back up, that if you have questions, please reach out, or want advice or talk through things. I love talking through things with people who are going to do the actual work, and I'll just have the ideas. So, and then Lisa and I both have put our Twitter handles on there. So if you are active on Twitter, please give a follow, and we can engage there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just want to email me your slides, I can send those out with the recordings as well.
That'd be awesome.
Great.
And if you all do get some things going, please tag us on Twitter, because I would love to follow along the projects that you create. That'd be amazing.
Yes, for
Thanks,
sure.
Dawn, for giving us such a organized place here to be able to share.
Oh, we really enjoyed your
this
presentation.
project.
Yes, thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much. We're going to end this and go on to our next session.
Wonderful. Thank you. And April, please reach out. I just saw you in the chat, so maybe Lisa and I can get you some ideas. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.